In the protagonist's past life, he worked in a rescue team and died in an accident. After that, he woke up in this world full of mutated beasts and those called the Awakened Ones. In this place, he also awakened a power. By expending physical and mental energy, he could create gems. If the target accepts the gem, he can control their life, soul, and even their consciousness. In theory, this seems like an extremely overpowered ability. But of course, there's an obvious problem. With the gem in hand, someone asks what Zhang Ping is doing. He tells Su Jingyao that it's nothing special and asks if she wanted candy. However, she tells him to forget it since she would never want to be controlled by him. The problem with the ability is that the person has to know what happens when they consume the gem and accept the contract voluntarily. Otherwise, it's useless. The original owner of this body nearly exploded with rage because the ability was useless. However, having lived for a long time, he had a more resilient mentality to withstand such a useless power. Still, Su Jingyao tells him not to give up and that soon he'll find some creature that will accept being dominated by him. The boy says it's easy to say, but besides himself, no one else would accept it. That's when he gets an idea and wonders why he never thought of it before. He starts eating the gem and Su Jingyao asks what he is doing. Instantly, the green power begins to envelop his body and a strange energy rises to the sky. Su Jingyao approaches and asks if he's okay, to which he replies that he is. She tells him to be more careful because it was scary. They then chat for a while. She says it's late and she's going back to the dorm. The boy asks if she really is about to graduate. She explains that she has already learned everything from the books and now only combat will make her stronger. The boy knows that joining the patrol team and protecting the land had always been her childhood dream. She tells him not to be too discouraged. Once he gets stronger, perhaps they can work together. The boy is so useless that he was given the role of farmer at the school. He tells her to forget it because he'll probably live a very simple life. Even so, the boy feels a bit sad. Although she had been a friend of the body's previous owner, he still felt strange leaving her. He thinks he really wanted to give her a hug. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he starts grabbing her. It feels like he's watching himself from another consciousness, wondering why his body is moving on its own. She is flustered and says she's leaving, and with that, she runs off. He tells her to be careful on the way. She turns around slightly embarrassed and tells him to also pay more attention to things. The boy waves goodbye with a smile. However, he noticed that his body moved on its own when he wanted to give her a hug. It was as if, subconsciously, he had commanded himself. Maybe it was a coincidence. Obviously, he wanted to confirm it. He commanded himself to fly like Superman and fell face first to the ground like an idiot. He prepared a mountain fist punch, but it did absolutely nothing except make him fall again like a fool. He ended up crying on the floor, but he realized that now with his mind he could perform any action. Of course, it couldn't exceed the normal capabilities of what a human could do. However, as long as he knew exactly the movement that needed to be made, he didn't need to practice. In theory, if the body is capable of executing the movement, he can master any martial art without much effort. The biggest obstacle in front of him now was his own physical aptitude. However, there was still something he wanted to check. The next day, little by little, he opens his eyes and notices he's in the cafeteria exhausted. His legs hurt like hell because he had ordered his body to wake up in the middle of the night and go for a run. The hypothesis that he could control his body even without consciousness was confirmed, and apparently no one suspected anything. People start commenting that someone named Lu Xiu was arriving. She greets everyone with a radiant presence, and the boy knows that she is the beauty of the school. Suddenly, he hears some strange cracking sounds and wonders what the hell it is. Next to him, there was some kind of creature with a giant fox-like face eating someone. The girl seemed to be getting consumed, and no one said anything. It was as if no one besides him was noticing it. That clearly wasn't Lu Xiu. All twisted up, she approached Zhang Ping and said he didn't seem to be doing well. However, at the same time, everything seemed normal in that place. But she was clearly a creature wanting to know if he was sick. Zhang Ping kept repeating to himself to stay calm, and with a trembling voice, he said he was fine. It was just that he had some nightmares and didn't sleep well. He stood up, saying it was time for his class, so he was leaving. However, Lu Xiu wondered aloud if she didn't smell fear. Walking down the hallway, he wondered why there were mutated beasts in the school and why no one noticed them. He went to the classroom thinking he had to tell the teacher about it immediately. But when he got there, he got another scare. What seemed to be the teacher was consuming a girl on the floor. Obviously, he ran out right away. He went to the top floor and sat on a bench, desperate. Something was wrong and he didn't know what was happening. The only thing that had changed recently was that he consumed the stone and started seeing these beasts. He wanted to eat another one, thinking that all this was some kind of illusion. Once again, the green aura started to come out of his body, and a system message said it was doing an evaluation. With that, the scenes he had seen before began to replay. The illusion disappeared, and he was left somewhat breathless. It seemed the system had unlocked an analysis ability. At the moment, he was only a 3-star human with almost no talent. What he also noticed now was that the contract gems had levels. One of the talents was absolute command, meaning the person had to do whatever he ordered. However, at the same time, since he was a contractor, he also had absolute obedience and couldn't disobey. Another talent of his was evaluation, which allowed him to better understand targets depending on the power difference. He figured this had to do with him eating the gem. He began to analyze the fact that he became both the contractor and the contracted. Since he could control his own body through the ability's consciousness, he was no longer affected by powers that created illusions for his body. These foxes were all high level, and he stood no chance against any of them due to the cognitive distortion they could create. They could eat a person without anyone else noticing. He remembered that Su Jingyao, his childhood friend, had mental abilities, so maybe it would be better to talk to her. After school, he decided to meet her. What scared him was what he saw outside the school. A romantic couple passed by him, but the girl had already been dominated by a fox. He then went to the patrol team headquarters. He approached the receptionist, who, looking beautiful, asked him what he wanted. The boy said he was there to find a girl named Su Jingyao, who must have joined today. But lo and behold, the woman also turned into a fox and told him to wait a moment. Sitting on the bench, he wondered how those damn creatures had already dominated even the patrol team. Apparently, not even high-level awakened ones could see this illusion. And if anyone asked what he was doing there, it was Su Jingyao. Zhang Ping said he was worried that she wouldn't adapt, so he came to check on her. She said he didn't need to worry and introduced the allies from her team, saying that everyone that took good care of her. The boy admitted that it truly was impressive. She then excitedly said that from now on, she would work hard and get stronger to destroy all the beasts and avenge her relatives. She suggested he should join the patrol team too, as they were short on members. But the boy, embarrassed, said his ability was kind of weak, so he wouldn't be able to help much. Seeing how well she was adapting, and given that he was just a farmer, he said he was leaving. However, he already suspected the truth. He only said goodbye to Su Jingyao and her entire team, who were all foxes too. Trying not to show fear, he left, wondering how the strongest group in that city had been wiped out. Su Jingyao had only just arrived, and she was already in this situation. These creatures were called foxes of natural order. Their ability made anything out of the ordinary seem completely routine, and in those moments they hadn't just infiltrated the school but the entire city. The entire city of Pearl had turned into cattle for these monsters. Using the analysis technique, he managed to uncover some details about these creatures. First, most of them ranged from intermediate to high levels. However, back at the patrol team, there were several creatures whose levels he couldn't even assess. Second, the creature that killed Lu Xiu was extremely powerful, and the moment he tried to analyze it, he knew he would be discovered. That creature was either at an advanced level or even a king-level beast. With so much power, it was no wonder they had wiped out the city without anyone noticing, especially considering that, compared to other beasts, they were extremely intelligent and all their abilities were for disguise. Fourth, it seemed the foxes always prioritized the most influential people in society, while the others were mere cattle for them to feed on. In this current situation, it would be a death sentence to face so many of them head-on. However, he couldn't just stand by and watch so many innocent citizens die. He needed a way to get stronger. A week later, he woke up at 3:54 a.m. Since he received the ability, it seemed his body was resting much better. In addition, he advanced to level 2 after training a lot. All the remaining physical and mental energy he had was being turned into gems to consume, in hopes that sooner or later he'd get a better one or some evolved talent. After all, ever since he leveled up, the gems had turned colorless, and he seemed to get nothing from consuming them. However, today he finally got another one with color. He consumed it, saying that it looked more like poison, but he hoped it would have some effect this time. After a while, power began accumulating in him, and in his profile he received a new ability, Night Walker. It granted him night vision, reduced his presence at night, and if he was in the shadows, he became completely invisible. In addition, the contract gem also leveled up to 2, and he wondered if it had something to do with his base level. If he could really gain a new talent with every level, he would eventually become invincible. But now that he had the new talent, there was no reason to delay. Time to start practicing. Activating the Night Walker ability, he said he wanted to test it. He ran around the school and noticed that his vision at night was now far better than during the day. He could spot any object, including a strange ring lying on the ground. He crouched, finding it a bit odd that it was there. He tried using his analysis abilities several times until he finally succeeded. It was the Ring of Assassination, which, when worn, made all forms of life unconsciously ignore the user completely. The analysis then showed what had happened. The natural order fox controlling Lu Xiu's body had faced a man, probably the true owner of the ring. He had attacked, but she seemed to be expecting him, and with a single slash, the poor guy was cut in half. He knew that Lu Xiu had always been an honest girl, so she wasn't the target of this attack. This meant that besides him, there were other people in the city of Pearl going against these foxes. Suddenly, a fox jumped over the wall and asked who was there. The fox leaped into the bushes, saying she was sure the ring had been there. She had noticed someone's presence, but strangely couldn't sense anything now. If he managed to escape her radar, he was probably an intermediate level awakened one or higher. The boy realized that the fallen ring was actually a trap, and the fox retreated, saying she had to inform the royalty. But that was great for him, as combined with the Night Walker ability, he was now basically invisible. The sun finally rose, and it was 5:36 a.m. Since he needed to get stronger as fast as possible, items were indeed the best solution. However, suddenly he heard some footsteps approaching. A strange voice called his name. He wondered who it was and who was speaking to him, but the voice only told him to hide. The girl then grabbed his face and warned him that they were coming, or rather, they were already there in his room. It had been 4 minutes since he woke up, and there were 3 foxes staring at his sleeping body. The one controlling Lu Xiu asked if it was him and prepared a red attack in her hand, telling him to die. The claw came straight for his face as he drooled. The fox paused the attack, thinking that if it had been him, he would have fought for his life. Besides, she couldn't sense the presence of that ring. Another fox, however, said he was very suspicious since he went out for walks every day. But today, he didn't. However, Lu Xiu, who was also royalty, said it wasn't him. That one was just a worthless meal, and they should learn that food in this city wasn't to be wasted. Some time passed, and the boy woke up startled. He spat out the ring, saying that was a close call. He was stupid to forget about today's walk, and he was lucky he forced his body to swallow that ring, avoiding exposure. What he found strange was hearing Su Jingyao's voice telling him to hide. He wasn't sure if he was getting sentimental or what was happening, but he knew he had to get stronger and get revenge. For now, to avoid any suspicion, he needed to continue living normally. Later, he went to the cafeteria, and 2 girls were commenting that they had found a body split in half this morning. It seemed it was a guy named Black Star, an extremely talented assassin from the city of Pearl. The boy wondered if it was the person from his vision. If even someone so famous in the city was killed like that, clearly Lu Xiu wouldn't be easy to deal with. The strange thing was that they left the body for the public to see. Maybe it was a way to send a warning to those opposing the foxes of natural order. Their surveillance was going to increase, and he urgently needed to find new equipment. After class, he decided to check out some blacksmiths. However, in every shop he went to, it always seemed to be run by a fox. Suddenly, he performed another analysis. The system congratulated him for having conducted 100 analyses and informed him that he had reached the intermediate ranking of the ability. He could now see growth potential and even some talents. The fox had called him into the shop, but he simply thanked her, saying he wasn't interested. His priority was to find a store that hadn't been taken over yet. He approached a blacksmith called Soul Iron, where someone inside said the sword was of high quality. A blonde guy was trying to sell it to the old man, saying he didn't want to brag too much, but that blade was extremely good and he was offering it for a low price. However, the old man told him to take his eyes off his daughter and get those trashy things out of there. Angry, the guy got in the old man's face and asked if he hadn't heard what he said. Suddenly, Zhang Ping grabbed the sword that the guy had left on the table. The man asked what he was doing while the boy used his analysis ability. The blonde guy came over, telling him to give it back or he'd get beaten up. But the system warned that while the sword was attention-grabbing, it was useless since it had been repaired terribly. Right then, Zhang Ping said that the sword would break, and indeed, it snapped at that moment. The blonde guy started crackling with electricity, saying that Zhang Ping had ruined his plans and asked if he knew who he was. He claimed to be a direct disciple of the martial arts master from Xingyi School. He lunged at Zhang Ping, unleashing a flurry of light attacks. But Zhang Ping had sent out a shadow clone. Then Zhang Ping simply slapped the guy in the face. The boy questioned how he could be so weak, and the blonde guy called him dirty. Zhang Ping wasn't afraid at all since he had already seen that this sickly guy was only a level 1 with limited growth potential. The guy shouted that one day he'd get revenge when he became stronger. Zhang Ping just thought that he was delusional. But while Zhang Ping was distracted, the guy tried a sneak attack. He ended up knocked out on the ground, and Zhang Ping commented on how much this guy liked fighting dirty. Suddenly, someone approached, saying they were gone for a second, and the blacksmith's shop got noisy. The one arrived with incredibly strong abs and warned that if the guy didn't leave, he'd be beaten up. The blonde guy ran off terrified, and Zhang Ping realized it would be better to leave too. However, the woman blocked his way, and he asked what the problem was. She said it would be better if he stayed so they could have a little chat. The scene then gave a peek into the boy's room, showing us the staircase where the story began, where he had spoken with his childhood friend. This was also the sports field where he did his daily morning walks and found the ring lying on the grass. Back at the blacksmith shop, Zhang Ping asked what the woman wanted to talk about. She said she was a weak, single girl who struggled every day to survive and had to take care of her uncle. She noticed that Zhang Ping had great potential and physical strength, so she wanted to ask him a little favor. She wanted him to stay with the old man named Liu Tifeng, take care of the shop, and learn everything about blacksmithing. Obviously, she would cover accommodations, meals, and even pay him. Zhang Ping was overwhelmed with joy, thinking it would be great to learn as he would need many items and didn't have much money. Plus, the shop didn't seem to be controlled by the natural order foxes. He struck a worker's pose, saying he was a man of the field and wouldn't shy away from work. She slapped him on the face, saying that's what she expected from a guy she was interested in. Zhang Ping muttered that his first priority would be to survive her hits. A few days passed with him working at the blacksmith shop, and someone told him to put more force into it. He asked if it was okay to do something like that, and she said it was fine since no one was coming to check on them. She encouraged him to continue, saying it was really good. Obviously, he was forging, not what you might have thought, right? She was teaching him how to hammer the materials, and she told him to wait a moment while she went to get some molds from the warehouse. The coal to be used was in a bucket, and he was warned not to let the fire go out. The problem was that there was more than one bucket, and he didn't know which one to use. He came to the brilliant conclusion that if he threw everything in, one of them would work. So he threw it into the furnace to keep the fire going. However, the whole place exploded. Flames shot in every direction. Zhang Ping thought he was done for and wondered if he had died. But then a strange skull appeared on his chest, absorbing part of the power, and all the flames seemed to be entering his body. Suddenly, he woke up with one eye burning. The entire place was filled with smoke and ashes, but he didn't seem to be dead. However, his heart was burning and racing. Realizing he was on fire, he used his analysis ability on himself. His growth potential had risen to 4 stars. The more stars he gained, the more he could evolve his abilities, and evolving the abilities he had already acquired would further increase his potential. What he found odd was that people usually had a limit to growth increases, so why was he awakening so many talents? This time, he had awakened Flame Devourer, which allowed him to absorb fire energy and release it at any moment. What he found strange was that he had consumed a level 3 gem that morning, but the power had only been released after this accident. Suddenly, the woman appeared, asking what had happened. She noticed that the scarlet scales were gone and said that those caused an explosion when thrown into the furnace, but she admitted it was her fault for not telling him. He apologized to Sister Rose Qiang and said he would pay the price to repair everything. She told him that just being okay was good enough and asked how he hadn't died, since it was hard to put out the fire from such a scale. Moreover, she saw that he had created a material that required an extremely high temperature. She started casting the item into the mold, saying he had great potential. She remarked that the Academy still rated him with low performance. He was good enough to enter one of the 3 major organizations. He said he knew the patrol squad and the investigation squad, but what was this third one? She explained that there was indeed a third organization in the city. Almost no one in Pearl City knew what they were called or what they did. She then asked if he needed equipment and told him to take the dagger if he didn't mind. Seeing its glow, he remarked that it looked quite expensive. The good quality dagger was called Beautiful Tears and dealt damage to any creature below level 19. She explained that it was worth at least 100,000, which would be around 3 years of salary for that fool. He asked how someone poor like him, who earned 3,000, could walk around with something like that. She told him to see it as a reward for improving so quickly. She mentioned that she was going on a mission and asked if he was sure he wouldn't return to the academy. He replied that she didn't need to worry because he had already filled out the graduation papers. She told him to take care of the old man and not let him open the shop. Zhang Ping realized that the foxes had no interest in this place because they rarely opened it. However, of all the things happening lately, it might have drawn some attention. Since it was night, perhaps it was a good time to take a look around the street. Out there, and he saw a little girl on a swing looking all cute. But of course, she was a damn fox with 4 stars of power. The interesting thing was that this was the first time he had seen a level 3 fox. Since both he and the fox were level 3, and he had the new dagger and abilities, he figured he could probably win. The patrol squad had been killed, but the investigation squad should still be fine. If he can deliver the body of a natural order fox to them, he could get some attention. But suddenly, he was frozen in place and someone asked if he was trying to attack a child. He was warned not to move or he would lose his life. The woman told him to drop his weapon, and he already knew that whoever she was far above his level. Both his Night Walker ability and the Ring of Assassination had been detected by her. The voice then said that if he didn't want to die, he should meet her at the training ground by the orphanage. With that, she vanished into the air. At least the fact that he was still alive meant she wasn't on the side of the foxes. He grew up in that orphanage, and as a child, he started calling it the training ground. But that's how she referred to the place, which meant she somehow knew him or knew something about him. Not only did this figure seem to be watching him, but she also stopped him just as he was about to make a move. If she had sent him there, she must have had a purpose. Suddenly, a paw stepped near him. A mutated beast approached, and he wondered why there was one in the forest. It was a level 5 armored poisoned rat. Considering the level difference, he thought about retreating, but then he remembered that with the dagger in hand, he could win. Especially considering that the orphanage children would be in danger if they came out and saw this. Thinking of how much Sister Rose Qiang trusted him, he couldn't back down. Even though he didn't know how to fight perfectly yet, he had read plenty of stories about battles and he had full control over his body. Suddenly, the rat lunged at him and started rolling in his direction. He quickly thought of a way to defend himself and managed to block the attack. The problem was that the creature kept spinning and its armor was extremely tough. It ricocheted and crashed into a rock. From there, it opened its hand and began gathering green energy. Zhang Ping began controlling himself as if he were in a game, dodging everything left, right, left to evade every attack. The only weak point of the creature was its eyes, as its entire body was protected by armor. Seeing the flames in his hands, he knew how to handle this. He rushed toward the creature, dodging its attacks, and said he'd make a feint first. He struck, but the rat defended itself and rolled into a ball again. But then Zhang Ping prepared and told it not to get angry. He unleashed a barrage of flames at the monster's feet, taking advantage of the moment when its resistance was reduced, and landed a solid hit on the creature. Sometime later, he leveled up and gained a few attributes. Clearly, combat was the most efficient way to level up. What he found strange was the appearance of a rat in the middle of the city. It was highly suspicious. While he was thinking about whether there were other creatures, something approached him from behind. In an instant, he seemed to fall into a swamp, and before he knew it, he hit the ground. He fell flat on his back like a fool in a cave. A voice reached out a hand and said he had 5 minutes. He recognized it as the same voice from before. A girl pointed an ice blade at him and told him to prove that he was human. He was confused, wondering how he could prove something like that. He had been born human, so maybe that was proof enough. But that he realized that if she was asking something like that, it was because she knew there were some beasts in disguise. However, she couldn't tell, which was why she wanted him to prove it. He then asked her to give him some hints about how he could prove it. He already suspected that the rack from earlier had been a test from her. She told him he had 4 minutes left, and he continued using his analysis ability. It had already been 20 times, and he kept failing. On the 999th attempt, it finally advanced to a higher level. With that, he tried again, and the analysis passed. Her name was Liu Cixin, a level 28 human from the Purging Squad. He had never heard of this group before and thought it might be the third one that Sister Rose mentioned. Angrily, she told him he only had 1 more minute to prove himself. He mentioned that if she called the orphanage the training ground, then she must have grown up there too. The problem was that he didn't remember anyone named Liu Cixin from the orphanage, so he asked if she was Liu Torn or Liu Yusho. Maybe she was Xingyu or Sissy. The boy received a small cut, telling him to be quiet. She said that none of this proved he was human. However, John Ping figured she must be Liu Sissy because she reacted when he mentioned that name. She was 3 years older than him, and by the time he had joined the academy, she had already graduated. He needed to recall something that only the two of them knew. He remembered that she once taught him the earth-crushing fist and began mimicking the movements she had shown him back then. He said that it seemed she really was Sissy. However, she interrupted him, saying she would ask a second question. She pointed out that his ability was the contract gem, which was supposed to be useless. So what had he been doing during this time, and why did he seem stronger? He explained that 2 weeks ago he consumed the contract gem and now had control over his body, making him immune to any beast illusions. Based on what he had observed, there was a massive group of natural order foxes within Pearl City. He believed that their entire tribe had already infiltrated. She asked if he was telling the truth since a fox's basic talent was cognitive distortion. He started explaining about the city's influential figures, the weapon shop, and even the girl on the park swing. All of them were natural order foxes. She told him to wait there while she checked something and asked someone named Jin Bo if he thought the information was reliable. The man replied that they had never discovered the natural order foxes inside Pearl City, but some investigations pointed to something similar involving cognitive distortion. He would send 2 people to capture the nearest foxes, and they should be back soon. However, at that moment, an explosion occurred behind him. 2 men were lying on the ground, and he asked what had happened. One of them came running, saying that the crazy one following them was the owner of the cafeteria. The moment they tried to ask her to come with them, she started attacking everyone. The next thing they knew, she was face to face with the leader. But the man calmly prepared his fist and told her to die, hitting her square in the chest effortlessly. The girl disintegrated, and he remarked that it was arrogant of her to attack like that. As the body lost its aura, it turned into a fox. The man confirmed that the boy's information seemed legitimate. Finally, they began to understand who their enemies were. He told the team to be informed, and they would start hunting down these targets. Meanwhile, at the Pearl Academy, the lovely Liu Xiu was lying down. Except, of course, she was a terrible fox. She and her friend seemed to sense something. Without hesitation, Liu Xiu leaped from the top floor, thanks to her distortion ability, making it irrelevant. In truth, she sensed that a girl named Yu Ju had been killed outside the city, while another had been killed in the business district. Who was managing to hunt them down so perfectly and avoid her detection? Obviously, she wasn't going to let this slide. Back in the dark space, Zhang Ping asked if Sissy had finished her investigation. She replied that she had, but he was still quite strange, given that he had received this ability out of nowhere. Since they couldn't fully trust him yet, he would only act as an informant. She would keep a close eye on him, and if he found anything, he should get in touch. Zhang Ping agreed, saying he'd do anything to avenge himself against the foxes. She threw him an item explaining that this jade comes in pairs. He had the cold one, and if he applied heat to it, the hot jade she carried would warm up, serving as a kind of signal. Still, she advised him to keep getting stronger. No one could guarantee his safety 100%. Zhang Ping was excited, playing with the jade, saying he really wished he had joined the martial arts academy, but he didn't have the money for it. Sissy said she'd talked to the organization to secure a spot for him. The boy excitedly thanked Sister Sissy. Recently, the number of foxes in the city had been decreasing significantly, allowing the squad to kill them all. Luckily, he had gained his ability at just the right time, discovered the squad, and learned her identity. Thankfully, everything was going well, and the foxes were being eliminated. Plus, he had received $10,000 right away, which was quite generous. A girl approached him, asking if he was interested in learning martial arts at the Beast King Academy. The boy agreed, saying he'd like to check it out. This martial world was highly capitalistic, with each technique priced in dollars. The girl assured him that it would definitely be worth his money. The Beast King's martial techniques were highly valued in Pearl City, and she grabbed him, saying that if he didn't believe her, she could show him. She then prepared and told him that the first 3 techniques were the monkey technique, the crocodile technique, and the phoenix technique. Zhang Ping noticed that the movements were much more precise than what he had been using. It really was a good martial art. The only issue was that it was clear the girl wasn't fully prepared to teach it properly. Being a gentleman, Zhang Ping asked if she was okay. As they were talking, two side characters showed up itching for a fight, and one of them asked who had given her permission to hand out flyers there. Embarrassed, she apologized, saying she didn't know she wasn't allowed to. Then that annoying blonde guy, Andy, showed up, saying that the Beast Fist technique was ridiculous. As he approached, our protagonist already wanted to punch him because he teased him about the Thunder technique. Of course, the guy didn't like that and said it was time for revenge from the blacksmith shop incident. But the girl stepped in front, saying no one was going to hurt Zhang Ping. The guys started yelling and tearing off their shirts. Zhang Ping activated his analysis ability. The two fools were level 4 and said they would finish them off. They were using a skill that reduced intelligence by 70% for a little bit of extra strength. Zhang Ping was confused. He wasn't even sure if that could be called a talent. He then turned his attention to the girl, whose name was Wang Jimin, and saw that she had a ton of potential for growth. She would definitely be strong in the future, but at level 3, she would only get beaten up. So he handed the flyers back to her, saying this was his problem and he would handle it. After all, he was eager to test the techniques he had just learned from her. One of the fools lunged at him, but Zhang Ping easily dodged and landed the first style strike to the back of the neck. The second guy came, but Zhang Ping elbowed him in the stomach, saying that was the second style. Then that useless blonde tried his lightning technique again, but Zhang Ping kicked him in the groin before he could complete it. Jimin was already impressed, wondering how Zhang Ping had learned the techniques just by seeing them once. She even asked if, in the future, he could teach her when she didn't understand something. Zhang Ping agreed, and she thanked him, saying that together they would get much stronger. Zhang Ping knew that with her 7-star growth potential, she really had promise. Maybe, in the future, he would be the one needing her help. When they arrived at the academy, they saw a bunch of people panicking because it seemed like the instructor was coming back. Jimin mentioned that Instructor Baidu was a bit cruel, and those who didn't complete their missions were usually punished. Zhang Ping asked if she had been punished, and she admitted that she was probably punished the most since she hadn't managed to accomplish much in a month. Zhang Ping wondered why she seemed so proud of that. Then someone opened the door and everyone greeted the instructor. Jimin told Zhang Ping to be respectful and cautious. The first thing the instructor said was to run 50 laps. Zhang Ping noticed the man's name was Bai Day, a level 25 human. He could already tell that Bai Day was strong, especially since his level was on par with Zizi's. Bai Day then asked Zhang Ping if he was the one who helped with the issue at the other school. Zhang Ping responded that he was. Bai Day prepared a fist and told Zhang Ping to take a look. Zhang Ping tried to explain that he wasn't that strong, but he began dodging the attacks. Bai Day asked what was up with that beginner talk, as he had heard that Zhang Ping learned the Monkey King technique after just one demonstration. Bai Day came at him, and Zhang Ping realized he wouldn't be able to dodge. However, the instructor was kind and just gave him a soft tap. Bai Day admitted that at first he didn't believe it, but Zhang Ping really did have potential. It was just a shame that he had learned from someone so useless. The movements that person showed weren't even close to the real ones. Bai Day said he would personally teach Zhang Ping, and the boy thanked him. But now it was time to deal with the slackers from earlier. Bai Day ordered everyone form a line and fight him, followed by 500 push-ups and a 10 kilometers run. As someone touched Zhang Ping, it was Jimin, embarrassed. He asked what was wrong. She said the instructor had never taught her privately, so she would love it if he could pass on his knowledge to her later. Zhang Ping agreed, saying they could go to the Soul Iron shop later to train together. She beamed with excitement, saying she thought he would reject her. The system showed Zhang Ping that she had a weakness, as it took her 90% longer to learn anything. However, if she trained the same thing every day, her learning speed would increase by 10% each day, up to a maximum of 100%. Clearly, this ability was a nightmare for the teacher, who didn't know why she couldn't learn anything. 5 days passed, and they were back at the blacksmith shop. Someone commented that her movement was wrong. The diligent boy had taken her to the basement and was teaching her, explaining that she was doing it all wrong. Even though he was breaking the technique into parts, she still couldn't get it right. But that Beast Fist technique he had learned was really something. At that moment, Rose Chang returned. Zhang Ping told Jimin to keep practicing while he went to check on things. Upstairs, Rose mentioned that she had almost messed up this time and still didn't understand why the number of mutated beasts was decreasing so much. Because of this, they had been forced to hunt up north, where they encountered some storm wolves. Zhang Ping asked if she got out of it okay. She replied that yes, they had used a technique to hide, and the wolves attacked another group, allowing her to grab something valuable, a gem that allowed people to control the wind with their minds. Zhang Ping asked if it was a wind gem, and Rose commented that he really seemed to know everything. With that, even a child could create wind blades. Zhang Ping heard a voice saying that her brother was starting to train. Another voice mentioned the wind blade sword, and yet another said that since Yu Shiwei had died, she would eat 2 more of them. With that, Zhang Ping awakened another talent. But then he heard someone talking about the 2 people inside the shop. He recognized the voices as those of Natural Order foxes, and they were discussing how the 2 would make a great snack. Zhang Ping wondered if they were planning to invade the shop in broad daylight. Meanwhile, Sizzy was taking a bath, reacting calmly even though Zhang Ping was about to be in serious danger. He questioned whether she would arrive in time, as those foxes could break in at any moment. Rose noticed something was wrong and asked if he had a problem. Zhang Ping turned to her and suggested she visit her uncle now that she had returned, as he was always talking about her upstairs. She agreed and said she would prepare dinner and buy some ingredients. But before leaving, she took the gem with her. Zhang Ping handed it back to her and thanked her for leaving, ensuring she wouldn't get involved in what was about to happen. He then rushed over to Jimin, who was practicing like a fool. He simply told her to be quiet and come with him. Just then, two foxes appeared and asked where they thought they were going. Zhang Ping told Jimin to stay away, but she asked what her mom and dad were doing there. She told Zhang Ping they were her relatives, so there was nothing to worry about. However, standing before him were two natural order foxes at levels 15 and 16. They asked Jimin who the person next to her was and why he seemed so scared. She explained that he was a friend from the martial arts academy. Suddenly, a dark space began to form around the two of them. Both foxes leaped at them, shouting not to let them escape, while Jimin appeared frightened. Zhang Ping told her to forget about them and hold on. The problem was that they seemed to be tracking him. Zhang Ping turned his back to protect her from the attack. The two fell to the ground and smoke rose. Jimin asked if he was okay, and he replied that he was. She then asked what her parents were doing, but Zhang Ping warned her not to get closer. They were mutated beasts. The mother fox commented that it seemed he could see through their disguise, and if that was the case, he couldn't be allowed to live. Zhang Ping barely dodged, realizing that his physical strength wasn't keeping up because of the level difference. The real problem was that the mother fox was now heading toward Jimin, who looked too scared to react, while Zhang Ping struggled to free himself from the other fox. Just then, Sizzy arrived and told him to step aside. She unleashed a barrage of ice, piercing one fox and then continuing to hit the other. She jumped to finish them off, but Jimin pleaded with her to stop. However, it was too late. Sizzy showed no mercy. She simply turned and asked if they were okay. Devastated, Jimin asked why her parents had become carpets. Zhang Ping tried to explain that they weren't really her parents, they were just foxes who had taken on their form. The poor girl was distraught, crying that it was impossible. They were clearly her parents. Zhang Ping asked why they had reverted to their true forms. Sizzy explained that if there was a fox above king level in the city, they couldn't be maintaining this kind of illusion. Last time, the foxes reverted to normal because they were killed outside the city. That's when Zhang Ping began to realize he was the only one who could expose the truth. He then told Jimin that these two had killed her real parents and assumed their form. When he removed the cover, the true bodies appeared, and he told her that this was the reality. The poor girl broke down in tears, asking how this could be possible. Meanwhile, Lu Xiu, that awful fox, wasn't too happy either. After all, 9 of them had been killed this week. In a meeting, someone suggested that they should just kill everyone and take control of the city. But another person asked if they were going to graze on grass after killing all the humans. Lu Xiu silenced them, warning that wiping out all the humans would be extremely inefficient and a waste of food. Their priority now was to find the people hiding in the shadows and eliminate them. The vice president suggested that if they brought in several strong beasts to attack the city, the powerful humans would be forced to reveal themselves. Everyone knew there were 3 organizations, but no one knew what the third one was. The 2 foxes nearby agreed that it seemed like a good idea. Lu Xiu stood up and gave her approval, but reminded the mayor not to forget that he was still human, warning that if he did anything wrong, he would be dealt with. The idiot mayor punched the air, vowing that he would never go against Her Highness. Back with Jimin, she slowly approached the puddle, looked at what had happened, and cried for her mother and father. She apologized, saying she had never realized the truth. Sizzy, ever so cruel, said that even if Jimin had known, she wouldn't have been able to do anything. Jimin, crying, pleaded with her to go easier, saying that she knew she was weak, unable to learn any martial arts, and that was why she had lost her parents. She lamented that she should have been the one to die. But our romantic protagonist, Zhang Ping, stepped in with a hug, telling her to listen. This wasn't her fault. He had also lost someone important and thought about them every day. Maybe if he had stopped her from joining the city patrol, she would still be alive. But he knew that even if he could go back in time, nothing would change. Joining the patrol had been her dream, and nothing he could have said would have stopped her. Just like Jimin couldn't blame herself for her parents' deaths, she needed to get stronger and protect those she loved in the future. Crying, Jimin thanked Zhang Ping. He was about to say he'd kill the foxes, but suddenly, he coughed up blood on her face. It seemed our boy was more injured than he had let on. Later, he slowly opened his eyes. Jimin, who had already moved past her grief for her parents, thanked him for being alive. He asked how long he'd been unconscious, and Sizzy told him to stay still. Excited, Jimin clung to his arm, saying she wanted to become even stronger. Once she gained more power, she would help him wipe out those foxes. Sizzy then suggested that Jimin stay with Zhang Ping, as her home would no longer be a safe place. Just then, Zhang Ping heard Lu Xiu's voice talking about the king continuing to sleep and about Huan Ziming's place. He told Sizzy that he had a lead on the foxes. He mentioned the vice president, and Sizzy commented that if he was connected, he had clearly betrayed humanity. That king they were talking about could be the one amplifying the illusion for everyone. Since the foxes were out hunting, it was their chance for revenge, and she would need Zhang Ping's help to identify them. Meanwhile, Rose was happily cooking, starving. The scene shifted to the purging squad's base. The girl named Manny complained that Sizzy was always bossing everyone around and making all sorts of demands, while Chen Luo just quietly observed. They entered the meeting room, where another, far more dangerous, person offered Manny a cup of coffee. This base was a dangerous place, if you know what I mean, and it was time for the meeting to start. Her name was Suji, and she initiated the solar recharge. Another person activated the black curtain, and the last one triggered the light and shadow distortion. Together, they created a celestial curtain around the entire city. Meanwhile, Zhang Ping thought that the purging squad was finally starting to trust him. They were the only ones who had a chance to deal with all of this, and they had extremely rare weapons. They also had a secret group for operations like this. The leader had the Black Curtain ability, which was responsible for creating those non-existent spaces he kept falling into. Suji had the Solar Recharge ability, which could give a long-lasting buff to allies, and Chen Luwei could turn herself or others completely invisible. Together, their powers allowed them to create the Celestial Curtain, which lured any creature below king level into the world they had created. Since the foxes like to use illusions to kill people, they were going to play the same game. We saw two girls walking through the city, talking about killing humans. One of them suggested they could capture the humans and take them back. The other commented that the city had been chaotic lately, and her friend asked if she was scared. Suddenly, the second girl stopped, and the one with purple hair asked if she didn't feel something strange approaching. The first girl was about to brush it off as paranoia until she also felt something and wondered where all the humans who had been around them a second ago had gone. At that moment, someone approached with a fist aimed right at the back of their necks. A small explosion echoed through the street, and the person remarked that it was a shame they hadn't been able to take them out in one punch. The girls realized that this was the person who had been killing foxes in the city and called him bold. It was Liu Bo who thanked them for the compliment. He was a level 32, and Zhang Ping had warned him that these two were level 25s, so he was confident. Both girls lunged at him, but he easily dodged one of their strikes. However, something strange happened. He seemed to take damage, even though he had blocked the attack. One of the girls leaped toward him, saying he was nothing but food. Liu Bo found it strange that even though he had blocked the attack, he was still taking damage. The girls kept striking him, taunting him, asking if that was all he was capable of. They found it ridiculous that their friends had been killed by someone so weak, but then one of them took a slap to the face with Liu Bo, saying that now she knew why. Her friend jumped in, shouting that he would pay for that. However, up close, Liu Bo said he could see it now. He had been defending against their human forms, but needed to remember that he was fighting foxes. It was difficult, but now he understood their true size. They were indeed strong when it came to sneak attacks, but in a real fight, they were nothing. Agonizing, the friend asked the other for help, but Liu Bo just smiled and asked if she was feeling nostalgic. With that, he slammed her friend right into her chest. As they were reeling from the blow, Liu Bo appeared behind them, warning that another strike was coming to finish them off. He delivered a crushing heel kick, driving them into the ground. Writhing in pain, the two foxes wondered why they couldn't sense the rest of their race. Liu Bo told them to stop overthinking it. This was the end. He unleashed an electric explosion, finishing them off completely. From afar, Zhang Ping observed and remarked that Liu Bo was indeed strong. Sissy replied that of course he was. After all, he was the leader of their division. But Zhang Ping couldn't help but comment that Liu Bo's outfit looked like something straight out of a Super Saiyan. Stizzy received a notification that multiple beasts were invading the city, and if too many creatures got through, the celestial curtain would overload. She told Zhang Ping that they would have to deal with the other creatures, and she would send someone to watch over the blacksmith shop. Zhang Ping asked who she had been talking to on the phone, and Sizzy explained that it was a big boss whom he would meet one day. Sizzy broke down the power levels. Low-level creatures were between level 1 and 10, and Zhang Ping was currently level 4. Mid-tier levels were below 20, where most foxes resided. Apex creatures like Jinbo at level 32 were at the highest level before reaching the king rank, which was level 40 or higher, a level where some foxes operated. As they walked outside the city, Zhang Ping realized it had been a long time since he had been in a place like this. He asked what kind of plants were growing around them. Suddenly, Sizzy grabbed his arm as one of the plants released electricity. A green bubble floated up and exploded, spraying liquid everywhere. Stizzy warned him to be careful. It was actually acid. She pointed to a rabbit and told Zhang Ping that it would be his challenge while she checked the surroundings. Zhang Ping analyzed the rabbit and saw that it was level 9. Even though it looked harmless, he knew he couldn't let his guard down and had to finish it quickly. He attacked with his dagger, knowing that the first strike was the most important. However, the rabbit didn't even try to dodge. Zhang Ping quickly followed up with a pearl fist, but the rabbit released poison from its ears. Zhang Ping realized he was still quite useless. The rabbit hopped around, activating poison traps from various plants. Zhang Ping commanded his body to dodge while trying to figure out what was happening. Clearly, the rabbit had insane reflexes, and his sneaky attack had been useless. Worse, a creature was luring him into an area filled with acid. The rabbit was fast and intelligent. This wasn't going to be easy. Zhang Ping noticed something strange. The acid wasn't burning him. Maybe the fire in his body was evaporating the acid on contact. The rabbit launched another series of attacks, but Zhang Ping responded with a barrage of flames, easily blocking the assault. Since the acid was liquid, the fire evaporated it instantly. Zhang Ping understood why Sizzy had assigned him this task. Despite how dangerous these creatures were, he had a clear advantage. The rabbit lunged, puzzled as to why Zhang Ping wasn't being consumed by the acid. Zhang Ping tried to defend himself but had trouble understanding the creature's movements. Worse, the rabbit's claws were also coated in acid. The creature had realized that long-range attacks wouldn't work, so it had come in close. Zhang Ping now had to envelop his body in flames to burn the acid from its claws. However, his flame reserves were limited. He charged at the rabbit, asking if it thought it was the only one with tricks. Zhang Ping tried a series of strikes, but the rabbit dodged. Finally, they were face to face, and Zhang Ping said there was no escape now. He had trapped the rabbit in a fire tornado. The problem was that he only had 3 flame reserves left. He stabbed at the rabbit, but it dodged and his reserves hit 0. However, that was exactly what Zhang Ping wanted. He began walking through the flames he had created, absorbing the fire and partially refilling his reserves. He coated his dagger in flames and struck the rabbit square in the back. The creature fell dead, but Zhang Ping realized that without matching its level, he probably still needed to finish it off. And so he did with a lot of determination. As a result, all his stats increased by 2 points, which was strange since he hadn't leveled up. The system explained that each level up became harder, so sometimes, when training or defeating enemies, he would only gain stat boosts. Zhang Ping, still at level 4, lamented how hard it was to level up. Poor guy. But then he heard a strange sound behind him, a legion of not-so-happy rabbits. Worse, Zhang Ping only had 2 flame reserves left, and there were far more rabbits than he could handle, including some huge muscular ones. He muttered that at least it was enough to activate the pendant and started running in desperation, calling for Sister Sizzy to help. But the rabbits were smart. They cut off his escape route. The area behind him was packed, and the rabbits were clearly coordinating their attacks. A barrage of poison was heading his way, and Zhang Ping had no way to dodge. But suddenly, an ice barrier rose up, saving him. He knew who it was. Sister Sizzy had arrived to save the day. She warned him that these bullet rabbits were in berserker mode, so she would have to take care of them, already preparing to send a wave of attacks in their direction. With that, the fools were all chased out of the forest, drenched and defeated. Now they looked cute, didn't they? But they were still damned creatures. Zhang Ping couldn't help but think, these cursed things only look adorable after they're dead. Sizzy, ever so cruel, snapped her fingers and everything turned to ice. The entire wave of creatures became frozen pillars. Sissy remarked that she'd only been gone for a minute, so how did this many creatures show up? Zhang Ping, of course, said he had no idea. She responded that the worst part was that this didn't seem to be the end. Another legion was coming their way. But instead of attacking, these creatures were headbutting one of their own that was trapped in the ice. They didn't even care that a girl was preparing a sword. It was as if they were all fixated on completing a single objective. However, Sizzy wasn't about to help them, and even though the creatures looked cute after death, she showed no mercy and finished them off. Since the whole pack was focused on the one in the middle, Sizzy knew there had to be something inside its body. She reached out and commanded it to release. The ice shattered along with the creature, and inside they found a spiritual control pill. Zhang Ping asked what it was, mentioning that it smelled nice. Sissy explained that some organizations used it to control mutated beasts. Usually, this was done by the Zhu clan of tamers. It seemed that after all this time, they were finally making a move. The pill emitted a strong scent that only mid-tier beasts could sense. It made them crave the pill, and once they consumed it, they lost control and became mindless. However, the Zhu clan somehow had the ability to control these creatures, which was still a mystery. Sizzy crushed the pill, explaining that if it weren't destroyed, another beast might consume it. But it was clear that there was a connection between these beasts and the pill, and they would have to investigate whether the Zhu clan was responsible. Before that, though, they would continue training just outside the wall. What they didn't know was that a hooded figure had been eavesdropping on their conversation. Zhang Ping had a feeling, though, that Sizzy already had her blade ready. Her attack sliced through a tree, but the intruder had already vanished. Zhang Ping asked why she'd done that out of nowhere. Sissy told him to forget it, questioning whether she was imagining things. A week passed, and all the foxes from the blacksmith area had gathered. The dangerous Luz and Yuki were among them, but of course they were just horde foxes in disguise. Beast attacks were becoming more frequent, and they wondered if it was Ziming's doing. Still, Luz wasn't going to rely on him, as it was time for her to make her own move. She told the others that, as many of them knew, humans had discovered a way to break free from mental control. Most of the foxes had disappeared from the blacksmith region, so everyone would head there. Their plan was to spread chaos and make it look like they were acting impulsively. That way, Luz could observe who would appear, allowing them to eliminate all threats. Meanwhile, back in the forest, the dumb bullet rabbits were still standing around. Zhang Ping sneaked up behind them. Since it was nighttime, he had his evasion ability active, allowing him to strike without mercy. For the past week, he'd been hunting these cursed rabbits and had reached level 6. Additionally, he had become familiar with all their attack patterns. First, he easily neutralized their long-range attacks using his flames. Typically, they would cover themselves in steel and try to attack or escape. Since the acid they used was flammable, it made it even easier to eliminate the ones covered in steel. He had also been using the Scarlet Scales to recover his energy, so the flames he used never ran out. This was the technique he called Flame Devourer, or maybe not, because even he thought that name was a bit cringe. The problem was that he had already used up all the snake scales he'd collected, but with so many kills, it should be enough to level up again. Finally, Zhang Ping reached level 7 and he was thrilled. His contract gem advanced to level 5 as well. He had thought the gem was connected to his level, but unfortunately, from levels 4 to 6, he hadn't gained any new abilities. He was eager to find out what power he would gain this time and really hoped it would be something combat-related. But just then, one of the rabbits changed expression. It took on a dark form and a purple aura began to emanate from it. Zhang Ping was confused. After all, that rabbit was supposed to be dead. But since it wasn't, he decided to use his last flame reserve to finish it off. He laughed, saying it seemed like the rabbit liked coming straight at him. But when he went to stab the creature, it caught his hand and dodged the attack. Zhang Ping realized it might be a spiritual creature and wondered if it was the avenger of the rabbits. Not that it mattered to him. He swung his blade, commanding it to die. The creature collapsed, shriveled and weak on the ground. Zhang Ping wondered since when these cursed rabbits had such a technique and started searching for a spiritual control pill. Instead, he found a strange purple object, but had no idea what it was. He tried several analysis attempts, all of which failed. He kept trying until finally the analysis worked. It was revealed to be nether essence, which came from the testicle of a black goat. Once again, Zhang Ping forced the analysis to try and see a memory of the item. Finally, he glimpsed the black goat fighting a horde of creatures. The beast went 1 on 30, and it easily started decimating all the creatures, or so it seemed. Suddenly, one of the creatures landed a bite on it, and it appeared that both of them had died. Zhang Ping felt that the orb had some kind of effect, but he didn't know how to activate it. Besides, the place it came from was pretty disgusting. He muttered to himself that he was an insignificant, useless insect who didn't have the luxury of choice. Harsh on himself, but he consumed the orb anyway. Immediately, he felt a shock, screaming as he couldn't understand what was happening. Suddenly, he remembered the moment when he hugged Jingyao and how she had turned into a fox soon after. She had told him that no matter what he encountered in the future, he needed to survive. Zhang Ping reassured her in his mind that he wouldn't die, not until he killed all those damn foxes. With that, he gained the nether body, which allowed him to convert the fear of others into nether energy. Each percentage of fear generated a manifestation that represented 10% of his current attack power. With fully recharged energy, he could unleash an attack with 1000% power. It was a perfect ability, both offensively and defensively. The most impressive part was that his growth potential increased by 3 stars because of this. Clearly, the nether body was more powerful than he had anticipated. But suddenly, Zhang Ping started crying, and even he didn't understand why. He couldn't tell if it was sadness, joy, or regret, but he swore he would avenge Jingyao soon. At that moment, a group of men carrying some things approached him. One of them asked if the kid was okay, but the other told him to leave Zhang Ping alone, as it wasn't their problem. Zhang Ping slowly stood up, his Hour of Darkness ability active, and said he was fine. However, the men ran off in a panic, which only fueled Zhang Ping's nether energy. It seemed like he was going to have to cause a little mischief in this world. The most interesting part was that the nether energy could form any shape he wanted. Curious about its strength, he swung to strike toward a tree. Even a blade created from just 1 point of nether energy sliced through the tree like paper. He then slashed through the falling trunk, cutting it into neat cubes like something out of Minecraft. He created a small shield that cost 10 nether energy points and easily blocked everything. This was going to be his trump card against high-level beasts. Suddenly, Sizzy appeared behind him, shouting for him. She approached, readying an attack, and asked if he'd seen the nether beast that had been detected nearby. Zhang Ping, feeling awkward, realized he'd have to explain what had happened. Sizzy asked what the deal was with him eating the nether essence, accusing him of having a death wish for consuming something so dangerous without knowing what it was. Of course, Zhang Ping explained that he had done it because his analysis hadn't indicated any danger. He said he had been calm about it, as if anything had gone wrong, he could have ordered his body to vomit it out. Sizzy, however, questioned what he would have done if that hadn't been possible, if the item had been a parasite that took control of his body. Startled, Zhang Ping asked if something like that had happened before. Sizzy explained that nether creatures were completely unknown entities. They didn't have a specific form and usually hid inside other creatures. When the host died, they condensed into an organ, and when another animal consumed it, they took control. The point was that nether creatures specialize in infecting those who consume them. Zhang Ping realized he had made a stupid mistake. The intense pain he had felt when he consumed the essence was likely the creature trying to take control of his body. However, since he felt fine, maybe that meant the creature had failed. Sizzy said that because Zhang Ping had absolute control over himself, the beast hadn't been able to steal his body. Still, she warned him that if he showed any signs of mutation, she'd have to cut him down. Zhang Ping apologized, and just then, a spider descended between the two of them, shouting surprise at Sizzy. Embarrassed, Sizzy tried to swing her sword at the creature but missed, and it scuttled away. Zhang Ping noticed that Sizzy was terrified of it, and she clung to him all flustered. He thought to himself that she still had the same fear of insects she had when they were kids. He remembered a time when he ran over to her, proudly showing her a beetle the size of her head. He admitted that even he would have been scared of that thing. But Sizzy had swatted it away, making it run off, and Zhang Ping was sad, saying he had wanted to be friends with it. Sizzy asked why he wanted a beetle as a friend when there were so many people at the orphanage who could be his friends. He replied that he knew that, but eventually all those people would leave and he'd end up alone. But Sizzy hugged him and said that no matter what happened, they would always be friends. Of course, she had made that promise but had abandoned him later and nearly killed him. Yet he forgave her. What a surprise. Now, however, he found himself in an awkward position as she leaned in for a hug, asking why he was squeezing her so tightly. Sizzy told him that he had been lucky this time, but it was important for him to remember that the world was full of dangerous things. From now on, he couldn't rely on luck alone. Zhang Ping thought that even though Sizzy seemed so cold after joining the squad, she was always concerned about him, even if she didn't always show it. She received a message and said, "Understood." Zhang Ping asked what was going on. She explained that his training and investigation would be paused for now because they needed to return to Pearl City. It seemed that Liu Bo had been injured, and they needed to go back to offer support. Zhang Ping was shocked that someone as strong as Liu Bo had been hurt and asked why they didn't call the other groups for help. Sissy explained that they couldn't alert anyone to their presence, and besides, things outside the wall were a mess. On the way back, it was explained that when the cataclysm began, they erected walls to protect what little was left. Because of this, traveling beyond the wall was extremely dangerous, and only a few independent awakened ones had the courage to do so. There were a few villages around Pearl City that hadn't yet been taken over by creatures. At sea, there were numerous apex-level creatures, and no one had any idea what was on the other side. When they arrived at the base, someone explained that they had been using the celestial curtain to monitor the foxes when suddenly, many of them appeared on Blacksmith Street, so they went there to resolve it. But it turned out to be a trap. Jinbo had been injured and was still recovering, so for the time being, Sisi would have to take responsibility and ensure the city's safety. Humbly, Zhanping asked if she needed help. Sisi humbly declined, telling him to return to the blacksmith shop and that she'd send him a message if anything came up. With that, the two parted ways and Zhanping wished them well. Finally, he was able to relax a little after so many days of training outside the city. He was curious to see how Jimin's training had been going, but then he noticed something strange. The people in the city seemed frozen in place. Someone approached and called out to him. Zhanping used his analysis ability, which failed 66 times, but eventually succeeded. However, he could only tell that the man was using an identity-hiding ability. The man commented that it seemed Zhanping could see the people, and that right now, he must be trying to analyze his abilities. He congratulated Zhanping, saying that normally an analysis-type awakened could only use their ability 10 times, but here, he was with no limitations. Zhanping was shocked at how this man could tell he was trying to analyze him and asked if he needed help with anything. Despite his fear, the man exuded an incredibly terrifying aura. Zhanping stood his ground. The old man asked if he wanted to have some fun. Zhanping did nothing, and the man asked why he wasn't starting. Zhanping responded that there was no reason to fight him, but the man questioned whether he had no reason to become stronger or if his quest for vengeance in South Nile was just a lie. Instantly, Zhanping was in his face, demanding he repeat himself. But strangely, reality seemed to shatter around him. The man teleported, and Zhanping thought he was behind him. As he turned, the man blocked his punch and said that Zhanping still had a lot to learn. Zhanping replied that they'd find out soon enough and unleashed a flame right at the man's face. However, the fire passed through, causing no damage at all. The man reappeared in the distance, saying that he had had his fun and now it was his turn. What Zhanping had hit was just a false image, and the man unleashed a slash. Zhanping was barraged with ice attacks and wondered how this lunatic had so many abilities. He began using a bit of his nether reserve to dodge, and when he couldn't, he pulled up his shield to defend himself. All of this was just to get the man to lower his guard. He sacrificed his shield and launched an attack in the man's direction. As the shield blocked the man's vision, Zhanping came from the side to land a finishing blow. The old man said Zhanping was clever, but he wasn't strong enough. He emitted a light that pushed Zhanping back, sending him crashing to the ground like a fool. The old man remarked that it was impressive for someone at Zhanping's level to have so much power. Zhanping realized he was pinned to the ground by some kind of telekinetic pressure and couldn't move. The old man said it looked like they would need to have a conversation. Zhanping immediately realized this man was far above Jinbo or even Sizzy. The only person with more power that he'd ever heard of was the captain of the purging squad. Zhanping, trying to be clever, asked how he could refer to that person. The old man said Zhanping could call him whatever he wanted and questioned if he really didn't know who he was. Considering the man had information about Jing Yao, Zhanping guessed he must be from the purging squad. He knew the captain's name was Sidu Shibai, but wondered why the captain would reveal himself to him. Zhanping asked why the man was there. The old man warned him not to think too hard about it, especially since he couldn't block a mind reading. He explained that in the 2 years he had been in Pearl City, he had never seen an awakened one with an unlimited type ability. Of course, that had piqued his curiosity. Jiang Ping asked if such a thing as an unlimited level truly existed, as he had thought Apex was the highest level. Shibai explained that